Arizona Wildlife Views, brought to you by the sale of hunting and fishing licenses and the Heritage Fund, lottery dollars working for wildlife. Some projects are made possible by the Sport Fish and Wildlife Restoration Fund.
Ready? All right, let's go find birds. Let's go.
Welcome to Arizona Wildlife Views. I'm your host, Chuck Emmert. Today, we're at the Arizona Game and Fish Department's Wildlife Rehabilitation Center just north of Phoenix. Every year, about 1,000 wild animals are brought here, like Hootie the owl, for treatment. Sometimes these wild animals have been turned into household pets. Now, taking a wild animal and turning it into a household pet is never a good idea.
Wild creatures are some of nature's most wonderful gifts and living connections to a world we can only observe. Watching wildlife in their natural habitat can be one of life's very special moments. They're beautiful, powerful, and separate from us, which is part of their intrigue. But when people take these animals from their natural world and bend them to try and fit into theirs, it creates nothing but disaster, and on so many levels. It's bad for the animal, bad for the person, and bad for the community. Linda Searles is the director of Southwest Wildlife Sanctuary, a licensed rescue and rehabilitation center for wild animals whose lives have been changed by man.
Cinnamon Bear was with her mother in Tucson, and she was doing what bears should do. They were foraging around in the trees, and a family saw them and thought, gee, wouldn't it be fun to feed these bears? Then we could have the mother bear and the baby bear come to our backyard every day, and it would be really cool. We'd get lots of cool pictures. So they started doing this. Well, in a very short period of time, Cinnamon and her mother became what we call nuisance bears. Once the homeowners, the family realized this, they called the game department, who had to come out and catch the bears and relocate them. They were relocated, and within a very short time, Cinnamon made her way from the relocation point down into another urban area and started begging for food, going through trash cans, walking into people's yards, and so she had to be removed. We were able to catch Cinnamon so that she could stay here and tell her story as it is. She is now an ambassador for why you don't want to feed bears in the wild. Feed a bear, kill a bear is pretty much how it works out.
Well, unfortunately, when you buy them, you get this cute little baby alligator, which is American alligator, which is about, maybe 3 months old. They come out of the egg about 10, 11 inches long. They do this little chirping, and people think that's cute, but they grow about 1 foot a year. So in about 10 years, you got one the size of Charlie over here, who's about 250 pounds, and Lucy back there, she's a year or two younger, and she's 175 pounds, and they're not even, and Charlie's only about halfway grown.
Cinnamon the bear and Charlie the alligator will now have to spend the rest of their lives in captivity. But they are the lucky ones, because space in certified sanctuaries was available for them. Most are not so fortunate.
The fate of most of these animals is to be euthanized because there's not enough shelters, there's not enough places in the United States that can handle all of them because they're being bred and commercialized at such a rapid rate. So there are a lot of roadside zoos, a lot of places that they end up that are bad places that they shouldn't be, which actually will then start breeding them again.
You know, it's incredible the number of animals that come through the Wildlife Center here at Game and Fish. We have had bobcats, Bengal tigers, African lions, servals, caracals. We've had gray fox, we've had kit fox, we've had fennec fox, which a lot of these are exotics. Some of these are definitely not animals that make good house pets. We've also had black bears. Can you imagine living in an apartment and trying to raise a black bear? We actually had one that somebody thought that they could condition it and train it and teach it to live in an apartment. That is never going to happen.
But people still keep trying to make it happen. In order to make a wild animal fit into their lives, the animals are often mutilated in an attempt to make them more domestic. This mountain lion was living in a house in Phoenix and was the victim of a botched declawing job, and now has to undergo more surgery to try and relieve her painful feet. The same fate befalls many bobcats and other exotic cats. A wild animal's dietary needs are another area where owners often fail them.
For instance, the skunk we have that was bred in captivity for the fur trade or the pet trade, named Hershey. The reason we named it Hershey is because the people that brought it into us, their main diet they had this animal on was M&Ms, and then also Cheetos, which is really sad. You've seen Hootie. Hootie's a gray horned owl that somebody who was thinking they were doing the right thing took it home and they were going to raise it. They found it and a sibling that had fallen out of a nest. The other one had already died. So of course they had a concern for this animal. They took him in, they fed him all the wrong diets, and because of that he has metabolic bone disease. His jaws are offset back in the location where the lower jaw and the upper jaw come together, and the beak, instead of the top beak fitting over the bottom beak so that it can properly rip and tear and grasp onto food and eat it properly, it's offset. So Hootie has a real problem in trying to eat.
We find a lot of them are underweight. We will find that they will have a small alligator in with some that are twice as large as the others. Well, and they'll just throw the food in there. Well, the little guy doesn't stand a chance. One, he's shy because all the jaw's going around, so he's scared to death he's going to get bit. And by the time these guys eat their pigs, you'll notice this guy's not eating right now. He'll hold it in his mouth just so somebody else can't get it. He's walking around with that. Now, he'll eventually eat it, but he wants to make sure nobody else gets it.
You don't have to take an animal directly out of the wild to end up with a wild critter in your house. There is such a demand for these animals that there's a flourishing trade in exotic species, which is, more often than not, illegal.
Plus, when you do that, you're promoting the exotics trade, which is promoting cruelty. You're promoting a trade that oftentimes sells animals to whoever will buy them, whether it's legal for the people to have them in that state or not. Thus posing heartbreak on the people when they have to give up their animal, and then the animal ultimately loses his home or his life. So in all, it's a lose-lose-lose situation for the animal, and it's a lose situation for the people that bought the animal. And when they buy that animal, they've left another space on the shelf which will be filled by that breeder. When you go to zoos and you see lots of baby animals, you have to wonder where they go. And the way the exotic pet trade actually started, the way a lot of these animals ended up in private ownership. For example, tigers. There are more tigers in private ownership in the United States now than there are in the wild in the world. And that is a very, very sad statement. And the way this happened is a lot of zoos were breeding animals excess because the public liked to see baby animals, so it got ticket sales up. When you see baby white tigers, and every year they have baby white tigers or they have baby tigers, you have to stop and ask, where are they going at the end of the year when they're grown up? Where do those animals go? Because next year they have another litter, and the next year they have another litter.
You also look at Montana, the bald eagle. She came to us about 3 years ago. Last April, she was 6 years old. She was born in a nest on the Missouri River just outside of Bozeman, Montana. Probably during the migration, she was on her way down and apparently possibly got hit by a car, but she had a broken wing. The thing is, we know somebody definitely had her in captivity, tried to rehabilitate her, did not know what they were doing, did not get the proper medical care and treatment for that wing. So because of that, she's no longer able to be released in the wild. Unfortunately, now she's going to be in captivity for the rest of her life, which is really sad.
The serval was being used to breed exotic cats by breeding a serval, an African serval, to a domestic cat to create hybrid cats called Savannahs. And this is very popular, and they're doing this with a lot of different breeds of cats today. It's a cruel process. Most of these animals make really lousy pets in homes. They are very fractious, they're very nervous, flight type animals. They typically will only bond to one person in the household. So it's just a bad idea. It's bad for the animals, it's bad for the exotics as well.
All of these animals have instincts that you cannot change. Things in their wild nature that are destructive and dangerous in private life. Russ Johnson of the Phoenix Herpetological Society has a great respect for the reptiles he rescues.
You read about in Florida all the time somebody being attacked. They don't know the difference between us and a pork chop.
A lot of people say, well, if this cat's domesticated, if the bobcat's domesticated, why can't I keep him in my house, or the serval or the mountain lion? Because, you know, they lay on the sofa, they act sweet. Everybody knows what their house cat, if you've had a house cat before in your life, you know what that house cat can do to you. If they're frightened, if they play too rough, if they're angry, they can do serious damage to you. So take that strength and that danger and multiply it times 20 pounds, 40 pounds, 50 pounds, 60 pounds, 80 pounds, 100 pounds. Now you're talking about serious injury, possible death, especially to a small child in the house or a visiting grandchild or neighbor child. This is just a bad, bad idea. Not good for the animals, very unsafe for the family, for the children, for the neighborhood.
And just because an exotic animal is not illegal to have, doesn't mean it has any business being a household pet. The iguana is the #1 animal surrendered to the Herpetological Society.
Well, our #1 rescue is the green iguana by far. We do several rescue, probably between 50 and 100 a year just in the green iguanas. The green iguanas are, we call somewhat a disposable pet because of their inexpensive cost. They're generally run about $25 in the pet store. Tiny little lizards, about 6 to 8 inches long when they start. They're somewhat handleable at that point. People buy them and they get bigger and bigger and bigger. Then they either move or something's changing in their lifestyle and they can no longer take care of this thing, and then they either dump it off in their yard. Green iguanas won't survive out here in the Arizona desert. It's too hot and too dry. They basically start having kidney failure in about 3 weeks. It's much too dry and there's no humidity here. They come from a very lush tropical environment. So again, number one on the rescue list or turn-in list for us is the green iguana.
So that means that private and government agencies are left to deal with the problem.
Well, Animal Care and Control is primarily responsible for dogs and cats, but our phone room receives a good 40,000 calls a month, and quite a lot of those calls are from individuals who have gotten an animal that they shouldn't have gotten. They didn't take the time to research the animal. They thought it was cool at the time to get the animal, and now all of a sudden they're dealing with problems. It's startling to me. It's startling that people would consider getting an animal without doing the research and without thinking about who this animal is and what the animal's needs are and how that's going to impact their life and their family. They get animals for the wrong reasons, and then we end up with the problems and the calls, and other agencies end up with the problems and the calls down the road.
Another thing that we have happen is people turning them loose, thinking, well, wolves or wolf hybrids born in captivity could learn to revert easily to the wild. Mountain lions that I raised in my house with my family could easily revert to the wild. Not true. They're going to pose a serious threat to people, and they're most likely going to be shot in very short order. If you have an animal like this and you need to turn it in, call the game department, call the American Sanctuary Association, call us. Look for an accredited sanctuary, because otherwise they could fall back into the hands of somebody that's going to breed more.
Getting animals into a sanctuary is only part of the challenge. Since these facilities are nonprofits that run on donations, they have the burden of housing, feeding, and caring for these animals.
We could use a lot of help, anything from labor to, we've had a nice construction company has donated some wood for us on a building we're building and some insulation. And right now what we need is the funds to do this.
Oftentimes when we get these animals in, people will say to me, well, gee, you've got these 2 beautiful mountain lions. Surely there's lots of zoos that would want these mountain lions. There's lots of zoos that would want these bears. Why don't you give them to them? The zoos don't have room for them. There are too many. The exotics trade has produced too many mountain lions, too many black bears, too many tigers, too many of everything. So there is a huge, huge surplus. You can buy a tiger for as little as $350. You can buy a mountain lion for $350. But when they're grown, they now pose a danger to the family, and they're now costing you $800 a month to feed them. And that's when the people decide, gee, this wasn't such a good idea and we want to place this animal. And there's only so many places to place them. We're filling up and running out of space, and that they're still breeding.
The other point, though, is when you get certain animals that should not be living in our homes, you also get animals that come with diseases. So, for example, monkeys carry about 98 of the same viruses that humans do. Reptiles, you can get salmonella very easily if you get an animal that you don't know the history and where that animal has come from. So from a safety issue, from a ethical issue, from a legal issue, and from a health issue, there's never a reason to have these exotic animals in your home, ever.
Wild animals are exactly that. They're wild and they deserve to have the right to be wild and free. They don't deserve to be caged or locked in a house. We have dogs and cats, domesticated animals that have been domesticated for thousands of years that make very appropriate, very good pets. And wild animals don't. They bite, they mark their territory by urinating and defecating in your house.
Perhaps Russ Johnson puts it best.
Anything you can't cuddle up to really doesn't make any sense to have as a pet.
Especially when there are so many wonderful domestic animals waiting for a home. Animals that depend on people to survive and that are very good in the cuddle department.
At any given time, we will have 1,000 homeless animals in our facility. These are animals that need families. They're animals that don't have anybody to look after them, to care for them. And we're really hoping that people consider opening up their hearts and their homes to take one of these animals into them. But we have so many fabulous animals. You know, too often people think that animals in animal shelters are here because they're bad animals. And it's quite the contrary. The animals that we have are fabulous, terrific family pets. Ex-family pets who just need to be part of a new family. Thank you very much. We have big dogs, small dogs, older dogs, puppies, kittens, anything that you can look for, you can generally find at Animal Care and Control. That's the unfortunate thing. We always have an endless supply of animals that are looking for people to take them, and once you've done your research, we can generally help you find what you're looking for.
Wild animals are unique, mysterious, and fascinating, but only if they're allowed to be what they are and not what we want them to become. Respect their wildness and leave them where they are. Don't exploit them by aiding the exotics trade. Instead, go out in Arizona's great outdoors and experience them as they should be, wild and free.
One of the great things about living in Arizona is that we can enjoy an abundance of watchable wildlife year-round. But in the wintertime, we can look forward to the arrival of snowbirds. I'm talking real snowbirds, as they make their annual migration from the north. Our national emblem gracing the sky. For so long I yearned to see and envied those fortunate enough to see him on the wing, being free. In Arizona, the possibility of viewing bald eagles in the wild increases greatly in the wintertime. That's when our eagle population expands from 41 permanently nesting pairs to over 300 birds. The growing public interest in these beautiful birds has prompted the Arizona Game and Fish Office in Pinetop to add a new program this year to their Watchable Wildlife workshops.
How many people have heard bald eagles before? So yeah, you got to be pretty close, and that's one thing we're trying to discourage, getting close enough to hear them. So we brought there some calls, and we brought, in case you hear this, you probably are too close, and it might be a warning kind of signal. So you would think that they'd sound a little bit different than this.
In the Pinetop Regional Office for the last several years, we've been trying to do quite a bit of watchable wildlife programming for the public. The program we did today was on bald eagles and bald eagle natural history. We did it in this time of year because this is when a lot of the migrating eagles actually occur. in this part of the state. So they'll be stacked up all around our waterways and along our lake shores, and we have several shore lines and lakes here in the communities of Pinetop, Lakeside, and Show Low. So these animals are actually readily visible. A lot of our residents we know are seeing them on a regular basis, and we simply wanted to put together something that would give them some information about what they're seeing, what the birds do, and how they behave.
Along with learning about the natural history of the bald eagle, the workshop includes lots of useful information on how to view the birds without interfering with their natural behavior. If you want to see or photograph eagles, make sure you have good optics to bring the bird close instead of you getting too close to the bird. Unlike other birds, you don't have to get up with the sun to see them. Most eagles don't move off their roost until an hour or two after sunrise. They are most active around water, but if there are no fish or ducks in the lake, it's not likely eagles will be using it.
The important issue here is not only people ignorantly going and visiting nests and not even knowing they're there disturbing, but there's a lot of people that really want to get a good picture, that really like eagles. Sometimes we can love wildlife to death. Same with, we're coming up on the spring now with a lot of orphaned wildlife or a lot of young animals out there. We can't say that enough. If you see a wild animal out there, if it's anywhere away from people, leave it alone. I mean, the only time we should be touching if there's a cat on top of it or a dog right there, we should try to let them fend for themselves because most of the time they do much better.
The wintering bald eagles begin arriving in September and usually stay through March. Some of the best locations near Pinetop to view them are Fool Hollow Lake, Rainbow Lake, Lake of the Woods, Woodland Lake, Pintail Lake, and Telephone Lake. Programs like this one in Pinetop and at other Game and Fish offices are paid for out of the Heritage Fund. That money comes from the state lottery system instead of taxpayer dollars.
You know, not everybody in Arizona hunts and fishes and takes advantage of those recreational opportunities, but an awful lot of people are very interested in wildlife and nature. And this type of program, funded through the Heritage process, enables us to give these folks an up-close and personal interaction with wildlife, and we're able to bring wildlife experts in to talk about various critters. And I think we get a lot of turnaround benefit from the public, as well as an ongoing support of the department mission and what we're trying to accomplish in the state.
It's just great. I mean, look at the turnout of people that came up here. It was a little teeny article in the paper, and it got this much response. It helps quite a bit. It just makes you appreciate nature and these people that work so hard and where our money's going. I had no idea about the Heritage Fund, and I play the lottery, and I'm happy to hear that money's going there. And it's great to educate us on programs to keep these things going. This is very important. My daughter just absolutely loves things like this.
I didn't know much about the bald eagles. I've done a lot more of the desert wildlife, just learning more about birds, and bald eagles are just absolutely fascinating. So it's nice to be able to learn about the identification, some of the habitat, some of the practices, see the amazing pictures that they showed us.
Simply put, southwestern bald eagles are magnificent. Their keen eyesight is 3 to 8 times better than that of a human being, and their sharp talons and powerful feet are well suited to snatching prey from the water or on the ground. Adults generally weigh 10 to 12 pounds and have a 7-foot wingspan. That's on a body that is 2.5 feet long from the golden yellow beak to the immaculate white tail. Now, while you are out around the lakes and rivers enjoying the eagles and other birds, you can also help protect them by picking up any old monofilament fishing line you see lying around and depositing it in a recycling bin or simply throwing it away.
Pretty deadly stuff. It's killed ospreys up here over on the Greer Lakes. We've noticed a couple of ospreys dead from the monofilament, and it's just not a good thing. So any chance you can have to pick that up as you're out fishing, stick it in your pocket, it'll help out the wildlife.
The Arizona Game and Fish Department encourages everyone to get out and enjoy the beauty of Arizona and all the wildlife that lives here as well. Programs like this one offer a lot of information and advice on how to make the most of your outdoor experience. You can contact any of our regional offices to find out about programs being offered in your area. Now, Hootie the Owl is a very common type of bird of prey. Another type of bird of prey in Arizona is the northern goshawk. They prefer large trees with open canopies. It best serves their type of hunting. A predator in densely wooded areas, the goshawk is highly maneuverable and fast. It uses these abrupt bursts of speed and acrobatic maneuvers to overcome their prey. Goshawks like to eat mammals and birds, ranging in size from jays and chipmunks up to larger animals like grouse and jackrabbits. Hunting may be done in flight, but more typical would be from a perch, silently waiting to dart out at an unsuspecting animal. Nesting begins in April, when females lay 2 to 4 eggs in a bulky nest that is built high against the trunk of a conifer or up in the crown of an aspen. Adult goshawks are extremely bold and aggressive in defense of the nesting area. The goshawk is listed as a species of concern in Arizona because of losses of nesting habitats. Well, that's our show for this week. If you'd like to find out more about wildlife rehabilitation centers and perhaps how to make a donation, you can check our website at azgfd.gov. On behalf of our producers, Carol Lind and Gary Schaefer, I'm Chuck Emmert. Thanks for watching.